All right, let's get to it, Jonathan.
Shall we?
Welcome to the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast, sponsored by BetMGM. Make sure you're using our promo code BETROTO, 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 if you're betting on BetMGM.com or the BetMGM app. John, we have a doozy of a week 3 in the NFL coming at us. You and I were just discussing off air. I mean, this is a potential bloodbath. We thought week 1 was rough. I know for a lot of people, week 2 was a bit of a doozy in its own right. But I saw a tweet the other day that we have more road favorites this week than we've had since, quote, at least 2003, as in like the data doesn't even go back that far. Like it's been 20 years since we've had a week like this. And, even the big road favorites that we have, for example, the Chiefs, at Indy, the Bengals at the Jets, those aren't gimmies. There's no gimmies this year. And, the first thing I want to ask you is, we do have 6 undefeated teams through 2 weeks. That is a pretty low number. We only have 1 matchup between undefeated teams in week 3. That's Bills-Dolphins. Does it feel like maybe other than the Buffalo Bills, there's just more parity than you can remember in the NFL right now?
Yeah, going back to the 2003 comment, I'm picturing like cave paintings of like 2000, like St. Louis Rams, -6.5 against the Vikings or something, and things of that nature. But yeah, no, as far as just the sheer lack of dominant teams, just that the truth serum, it makes me think that like the Philadelphia Eagles might be the second best team in football. And I got to just be like that means that something is horribly awry. And like Jalen Hurts is playing great. The offseason acquisition of AJ Brown looks like it's, working out as well as they could have hoped. They got Devontae Smith more involved last week, everything like that. But it's like, how do the Eagles pass the eye test to the extent to where they're the second best team in football right now? And we see like this week in terms of line movement, and I think this is very reflective of the two offenses, but like Bucks Packers opened up at like 48.5 or something. We're down like a full touchdown in that game. I mean, like just the scoring around the league. I think you and Jeff were talking about it on Monday's show, where it's 10%, it's down. Scoring is down 10% league wide right now. That is just massive. And I understand early season, people aren't playing full preseason, aren't playing their starters, so that you can understand a little bit of rust, but like 10% is a pretty staggering figure. So yeah, I mean, it does feel strange. It does feel like there really isn't that sheer dominant team. I think the Chiefs, the drop off hasn't been extreme, but Jim Coventry brought up a good point to me on XM the other day, where he noted that yes, they looked great against the Cardinals, but the Cardinals did all the big no-nos that you're not supposed to do against the Chiefs, whereas the Chargers kind of gave them a bit more of a difficult look, and it slowed the offense a little bit. So I still like the Chiefs and feel like they are right in that Super Bowl discussion. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it's the Bills and everyone else right now.
It really does. And, to go back to what you mentioned on Monday, the scoring being down, it's a lot of the marquee offenses for the last couple of years are the ones that are the culprits, right? I mean, it's the Detroit Lions are second in the league in points right now, but you got the Buccaneers, the Bengals, the Packers, the Broncos, the Vikings, the Titans, who were the 1 seed last year, Dallas, Indianapolis, all those teams right now are in the bottom half of the league in total points through 2 weeks. So, a lot of it is just teams that we thought would be better on offense coming out a little bit more slowly. I mean, the Buccaneers have 2 touchdowns through 2 weeks. That is a huge surprise. And I don't think that's going to get any better anytime soon with the injuries that they have on the offensive line and especially at receiver. But we'll dive into Bucs Packers in a little bit. I want to look back briefly on week 2. We did hit some of our props. I had Aaron Jones anytime touchdown, Christian Kirk anytime touchdown. I mean, Christian Kirk getting in the end zone, that just feels like a layup at this point. You hit Lamar over 19.5 completions. That was another game where the Ravens had to rely on throwing the ball to rack up a ton of points. But like I said, only 6 undefeated teams remain in the NFL. And it makes for really difficult handicaps week to week. And, a lot of these teams, like I was prepared to go all in on Cincinnati. I didn't think there would be any sort of Super Bowl loser hangover. I thought their skill position guys would just be overwhelming week to week. And looking at the schedule several weeks ago or months ago, you're thinking, all right, week 3 against the Jets, that's going to be like, that could be like 40-7 in favor of the Bengals. And, now they're one of those teams that like, they really need to prove something to us here in week 2. But let's start with our 2 teams. The Jags obviously wiped the floor with the Colts. They're the talk of the town right now, 24-0. That game was not competitive whatsoever. I want to tread lightly in talking about the Ravens, who were one of the 3 victims of, literally historic comebacks in terms of how statistically unlikely they were.
Yes. And first of all, again, credit to the Jags, kudos to the Jags. Continuing, again, one of the stranger things in football where Indianapolis, there seems to be a force field around Jacksonville when they try to go into what the artist formerly known as Alltel Stadium and try to escape with a victory. It simply just doesn't happen. As it comes with the Ravens, their run game is so bad. You have Kenyon Drake, you have Justice Hill, who missed all of last year with an Achilles. You have what's left of Mike Davis, and you have an offensive line that's missing some key pieces. And so when you have a 21-point lead, it doesn't feel safe because you simply can't run the ball unless it's Lamar Jackson. And there was a couple like pivotal sequences that just didn't go the Ravens' way. Lamar Jackson at the goal line getting his touchdown called back, and then there was a third down play, throw to Isaiah Likely, and the play kind of was strung out in a way that it looked like it was getting called dead. And it's sort of, if you look at just the body language on a lot of the players, it almost looked like a dead play, but it ended up not being. Lamar Jackson throws the ball to Isaiah Likely, who actually had a decent game to that point, drops a key third down, ball goes back to the Dolphins, and we know what happens from there. Because the Ravens, they also, in addition to not being able to run the ball, they can't generate a pass rush. They just signed Jason Pierre-Paul this week, so that's something. But at the same time, you're relying so much on Odafe Oweh and Justin Houston, and there's really nothing else coming in as far as the pass rush depth. And you play that many snaps for those big guys, like there's just diminishing returns. So and that, of course, leads to the secondary getting burned because there's no pass rush coming. And I think the Dolphins were kind of like the worst type of team to be playing in that type of setup. The Patriots, very different. I'm looking forward to getting into that one. But yes, the Ravens, they're a good team. They're not going to play. If they play their game, they're not going to lose to bad teams. But I think they have the type of issues right now to where you can't really trust them against quality opponents either.
The secondary is shockingly poor. It was unbelievably bad against Miami. Kyle Hamilton, a prospect that I loved coming out of Notre Dame, he was lost on a few of those plays.
He doesn't look good.
You can kind of tell, I think, from some post-game comments that I think a lot of the blame for those late touchdowns was falling on Kyle Hamilton. It's tough for us as a fan to watch and just think, like, how do you this goes back to middle school football, like just nothing behind you. Don't let anybody behind you. Of all people, Tyreek Hill. And it happened, 3 times in the fourth quarter. An unbelievable collapse by Baltimore. But like you said, there were more factors other than that defense, some kind of fluky plays in that game. The Lamar touchdown that was reversed, that to me was like the longest reversal of all time. Like I saw that happen on Red Zone, and then like 25 minutes later, I check and they had removed it. I'm like, what happened here? Like that I thought they already kicked the extra point. I thought they already kicked off. And yeah, for whatever reason, they felt the need to put that one under a microscope. But a confluence of events, leading to that demise for the Ravens. What was your overall worst call, do you think, of week 2? I have plenty, but what were yours?
I thought that the Bengals would go in and just kind of right the ship essentially, and they certainly did not. There's some really concerning stuff for them. I thought the Raiders I was more so just trying to bury the Cardinals completely. So I figured that, even with the line movement jumping from like 2.5 for the Raiders up to like 5.5 on game day, and I felt good about it, and it looked good for a long time until, of course, it didn't. Things got really crazy at the end of that game. But backing the Raiders, that obviously burned me pretty badly. And then the Steelers, rat line of the week, you sniffed it out. You knew that,
like a blood out.
Yeah, truly. I mean, impressive stuff. There Watson, and Yeah, it's just it was proof positive that you just can't really trust the Steelers and Mitchell Trubisky even at home as underdogs against this Patriots team. So I felt very duped and very donkey-ish for backing the Steelers in week 2 against the Patriots, even when that line was as fishy as it was.
In your defense, I believe you did identify it as a potential donkey pick. So
Mm-hmm.
you knew what you were getting yourself into, but you ended up beating the trash anyway. Understandable.
Self-fulfilling donkey see.
Yes, exactly. I blindly picked against the Jaguars. I still had a bad taste in my mouth from some of the atrocities that we witnessed against the Commanders in week 1. And had I known Michael Pittman and Shaq Leonard wouldn't play, by the way, I still have to remind myself like hard every time it's not Darius Leonard. Had I known that, I think I would have taken the Jags to cover, but I sure as hell wasn't going to pick them outright, and I wasn't going to pick them to win by 24 points in that game. So they've thrown me into a tizzy. I don't know what to expect. And we'll break down Jags Chargers in a little bit. A game with some just monster variables on the Chargers side. I too was all over the Bengals. I'm still on the Bengals this week. I refuse to believe that their offense is as impotent as it's looked. I thought for sure this would be a get right game, but man, that offensive line, 13 sacks now on Joe Burrow in the last 2 weeks, and they could have had more. I mean, he was scrambling for his life a couple times throughout that game against Dallas. But yeah, the Bengals are a mess. I also wrote in my Beating the Book, my weekly picks column, that the Seahawks would be a team that would put up a fight every week. They're not going to be an easy out. That was not true at all. They put up no fight whatsoever against the 49ers. So, that they're one of those teams too that, and this happens every year, but a lot of what you see in week 1, you think is definitive, right? And, I thought, wow, Seattle, pulling off the win against a really good Denver team. So 1, we see what Denver looks like in week 2, and all of a sudden that win doesn't look quite as impressive. And 2, I'm starting to think Seattle in a lot of ways was just kind of running on anti-Russell Wilson fumes in week 1.
That's powerful gas, but it burns quick.
Gas, baby. And yeah, I think they're probably closer to the team that we saw in week 2. And if you're a DK Metcalf fantasy owner, which I may be in a league or two, it's not looking good right now. The Geno Smith experience. I think he started the year 18 of 19 passing. Since then, it's just been a sharp decline. But let's go to the other side of this. What were some of your best calls? Let's try to pump ourselves up here before we move on to week 3. What were your best calls last week?
So Dolphins, basically, the reversal of your feelings on the Jags going into last week. So, whereas your pessimism led you down the wrong path, mine led me down the correct path.
In a very roundabout way.
Yes, it took a minute. It took 45 minutes, really, but it ended up happening with the Dolphins. The Buccaneers, I understood where a lot of the logic was coming from, where the Tom Brady Buccaneers era, it hasn't gone particularly well in New Orleans, especially in the regular season. They won that playoff game a few years back, but otherwise, everyone seemed to be like, this Bucs team, they looked shaky. They got these injuries. There's that history. The hilarious Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans feud continued, of course, everything like that. But I still felt like the Saints were a team that was a good one to bet against, and that ended up playing out pretty well. I thought that the Packers were going to smoke the Bears. I didn't want to take too much away from their week 1 no-show in Minnesota. That they certainly showed up on that Sunday night game. Could have been worse even, I really felt like. And then the Texans, just because there was too many points to be trusting with this current Broncos team, and it seems like the odds makers have adjusted, and now we see where the Broncos are home underdogs against technically speaking, a backup quarterback going into the season, even though Jimmy G obviously isn't your run of the mill backup quarterback.
Yeah, I think those are all strong calls. You have more than me. I just felt good about calling the Packers. That was my best bet last week. I just thought there was no way that they didn't find a way to win that game convincingly. And, had that replay on the Justin Fields no touchdown gone the other way, maybe they don't end up covering that big number. But, I think that was the type of game that we expected to see from Green Bay. And I'm looking forward to breaking down Bucks Packers. I guess I said that incorrectly. But going to be a shockingly low-scoring game, I think, between two Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers-led teams. Now that we have 2 weeks under our belts, who have been the biggest surprise teams for you relative to what your expectations were coming into the season? And these could be either good or bad surprises.
So I think, it wouldn't have shocked me one way or the other that the Lions were 1-1 after 2 weeks, but I think the way that the offense looks is so impressive. I figured that the Lions' path to success this year was going to be, just playing hard for 60 minutes and, no glitz or glamour, just kind of like playing good, hard-nosed football. But no, they've scored 35 or more points in both games, against the Eagles and the Commanders, respectively. The offense looks like it's clicking. The offensive line, all the investment that they've made along that front, it really seems to be paying off. And then, thankfully for me, as a frequent Amon-Ra St. Brown drafter, that dude looks like something else. And I saw he was clowning on Diami Brown, because he famously in Hard Knocks, he was listing all the receivers that got drafted in front of him. And I didn't think it was that crazy during that draft for a lot of those guys to be going ahead of him. But he clearly fell way too far. And yes, I mean, this Lions team, it kind of goes back to Jared Goff with the Rams. Like when everything else was working, Jared Goff can look actually pretty good. So that we're starting to see that formulate there in Detroit. Aiden Hutchinson looking good. So I do think that, I wanted the Lions to be good, but I had to try to be skeptical just based on the long track record of them really, being one of the bottom feeders in the NFL. But I'm excited for the Lions to be competent this season. I'm excited for their game against the Vikes. And then the Titans, like I definitely had the sniff out for them being one of the potential, every year there's teams that make the playoffs the previous year that don't the following. I felt like the A.J. Brown loss was going to be huge, but I didn't think it'd be this bad. And it doesn't totally shock me that they got blown out by the Bills, but we're talking starters getting pulled in the third quarter, like an Alabama game or something. Like that was really, really embarrassing for them. And I just don't really see it getting a whole lot better. I think we're going to see the Malik Willis quarterback controversy start to come in here not too far from now. And I think that he's going to struggle too, but I think Ryan Tannehill is basically going to play his way out of the job. I didn't see that coming. And, their loss to the Giants too was also bad. And them losing, kind of via the type of gutsy coaching that usually we're used to seeing on the Tennessee side with Mike Vrabel. It happened to them. They got a bit of a spoonful of their own medicine. But long story short, I didn't think it'd be this bad for Tennessee. I thought that they at least had like a 6 to 7 win floor. They just didn't really have a high ceiling, but like this could be a really, really bad season for them.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out a lot about the Titans. We're going to find out a lot about the Raiders in that matchup in Nashville this weekend. I mean, if the Titans fall to 0-3, like the thing is, they could be sitting at like 2-7 and be like 2 games out of first in the AFC South. That's the thing. Is like I don't think the season will feel like a true disaster until much later because the Colts look like a disaster. You never know about the Jags. I mean, the Texans are winless as well. So it's going to take, a true bottoming out, I think, for Tennessee to really be out of the mix. But the thing with them too is not only, did they blow that game in week 1, you get absolutely shellacked in week 2, but now you have injuries as well. You lose your left tackle in Taylor Lewan. You got injuries all over the defense. They lost Bud Dupree. They're banged up in the secondary. I mean, it's going to be a long road for the Tennessee Titans if they don't find a way to win at home against the Raiders. I have the Colts on my list. I mean, they've been basically the worst offense in the league so far. I was completely wrong, and a lot of people were too. I'm not alone in this one. I need people to back me up here.
I basically said, at certain points, people digging in the RotoWire archives that like Indianapolis not the worst $5 Super Bowl favorite,
right? I think we mentioned that on the first episode of this pod a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I love that bet. That's a great idea. I mean, they look awful. I think one of my worst calls was thinking that Matt Ryan would avoid a lot of the just obvious mistakes that doomed them last year with Carson Wentz. And like the reason you bring in Matt Ryan is more than anything to raise your floor, to make sure that you don't lose to the Jaguars when you need a win in the final week of the season, to make sure that you're not down 20-3 against the Texans in week 1, to make sure you don't get shut out by the Jaguars in week 2. So, that's been a disaster. I think with the Colts, I was kind of willing to give them a pass for the lack of talent at receiver and at tight end. And that's been a huge issue so far. We saw without Michael Pittman, I mean, they had nothing on offense. Matt Ryan was lost from the start of that
Totally.
game. And, defensively, they've kind of been a mess as well. So to me, that's probably the number one team I was wrong about. Cincinnati's on my list. I'm still not convinced that Cincinnati's bad. I think they turn it around. I feel a lot better about where they're going to be 4, 5, 6 weeks from now than I do a team like the Colts. I guess I have to put the Giants on the list. In no world did I think they would be 2-0, but the opponents haven't been great. I do think this thing comes crashing down at some point. I've not been impressed whatsoever with Daniel Jones. I think he looks as rough as he ever has. And the last one, I mean, the Denver Broncos. I thought this team was going to be maybe like a borderline wagon, not a full wagon, not a Conestoga, but a radio flyer type of wagon. Like
you'd be really happy with it in Oregon Trail.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, strong, sturdy wheels. You're not going to have to be like repairing it and like dumping things out to lighten the load. Like I really thought they were going to hit the ground running. I was team Russell Wilson still has some left in the tank. And, much like Cincy, I do think there's enough talent on this team that they'll figure it out. And a lot of their wounds so far have been self-inflicted. They're also 1-1. They're not 0-2. They found a way to win. But I'm also of the belief that if they played any other team other than maybe the Bears last week, they probably are 0-2 right now. I mean, it's been an unmitigated disaster coaching wise. They're yet to score a touchdown in the red zone. And they're another team like Tennessee that, they're struggling and they're also losing important players every week.
Yeah, no, I mean, Judy goes out last week. They've lost some key pieces along that defense. I saw a heat map earlier this week of Russell Wilson's like passing chart, and like he's either going deep down the left sideline or he's dumping it off, and there's no in between. And when you have the amount of at least what I believe to be talent in the tight end room there, get the middle of the field going, like get it operating. Alberto, like he's talented. I think probably there's some people that roll their eyes, but he is a good player. Like get him the ball, like up the seams, especially when you're so monochromatic otherwise, where it's like, it's either Sutton down the left sideline or the play is basically busted. You need to have more viable routes going each time out. And that's on Hackett. And, things seem to have already soured, the fans like loudly calling down the play clock during the game against the Texans. Now the microscope is really on them again this weekend with that game being a Sunday nighter against an actually good 49ers team and it's going to be in Denver. So that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, to me, that's probably the single most interesting game of the week that has plenty of interesting games. Let's talk about the lines in week 3. And of course, we'll be looking at the lines via the BetMGM Sportsbook. And as always, you can use our promo code BETROTO at betmgm.com or on the BetMGM app. John, which lines to you are a little too high right now? As you kind of do your analysis, you and I both write a picks article each week. You can find those over at rotowire.com. But which lines to you do you feel like are too high in favor of one team?
This was a tough prompt to answer this week because last week we had multiple 2-score type of spreads. This week, pretty much everything is 7 or under. So it's a lot tighter this week. I think the expectation is that these games will be a lot closer. And when the expectation is like that, I'm sure that we are going to end up seeing some blowouts as a result. But one of the big numbers that stuck out to me, and maybe this is just because of how impressed I am with the Dolphins, not to say that I'm not impressed by the Bills, but Bills playing on the short week, going down to Miami, I think betting them to win by a touchdown or more against a Miami team that I think is going to give them, everything it has. That one stood out to me as being a bit too high. So I do like the Dolphins to cover that number, but really that was the only one that felt like, nope, that's too many points. Maybe you could also say the Chargers going up against the Jags, but if Justin Herbert's fully good to go, then that's a different story. I mean that line has danced around a good bit. That was at 10 points when we were talking a week ago, dropped down to 9, and now it's 7 after in terms of the chain of events. Justin Herbert gets that rib injury at the end of the game. It drops to 9, and then the Jags impressively shut out Indianapolis, and then it goes down to 7. So that's a tricky one as well.
The Chargers line is just impossible to me this
Yes.
week. There's so many variables. I was just reading now, Corey Lindsey did not practice today. JC Jackson did not practice today. JC Jackson also looked terrible. In some ways, I thought lost them the game with a few awful plays against KC on Thursday Night Football. That was a situation, I think, where you're like, you want your star cornerback back, but maybe he came back too early. I don't know if he was a little rusty. But getting burned by Watson on that long tight end, that was a rough moment for JC Jackson. But
Yes.
I don't know how to attack that game at all. Obviously, it's a stay away until we know what's up with Justin Herbert. But the big thing for me is, okay, I think the expectation in general is that Justin Herbert will end up starting this game. He'll likely have the big like Jamarcus Russell QB jacket going, but that can only do so much, right? I mean, you got Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker coming off the edge. Like, what if he takes a sack or even just takes a hit after releasing a throw early in the fourth quarter? I mean, this feels like to me an injury that could be aggravated really, really easily. And I know he stayed in the game late against KC and still made some big throws, got us the cover in that one. But he also had that 3rd down and 1 where it looked like he was just going to, kind of walk his way to a first down. And like he couldn't even get his body across the first down line and kind of had to just, kind of sheepishly throw the ball away because he was in so much pain. So even if Herbert starts, I think a lot of people are going to jump on the Chargers. I think they'll be a popular survivor pick. I would just be worried that he starts the game and doesn't finish the game.
Right. And then, lo and behold, you'd be asking the most decorated backup quarterback of all time and Chase Daniel to throw more than a handful of passes. And that's not his bag. Like his bag is collecting the bag. His bag is just hanging out there, being a short, squat fella with a big chin and just
always
being
the backwards hat, but it's a fitted hat, very like 2009 type of look.
Big time. Yeah. Big time.
He's got a lids like black card.
Nothing to add there. That's the perfect summation of one Chase Daniel. Very Mizzou quarterback. But so that could be dicey. And therefore I don't like generally if this was Herbert 100%, I think the line would be different. But in a week where Survivor kind of as a byproduct of what we're talking about here, where there are just so many funky matchups with bad teams going against bad teams, that type of thing. The Chargers would be really popular, but it's hard to back them this week. And speaking more on Survivor for a moment, the Bengals, I know we were talking about them. They've been like the Survivor wreckers, right? Because they were a really popular pick in week 1. And then last week, if you survived week 1, which was total carnage, I think a lot of people and not complete, without reason, picked them to go into Dallas without Dak Prescott and get the win. And they, obviously were unable to do so. Just a side comment that the Bengals and Survivor have been a tricky mix this year, to say the least. A lot of collateral damage from them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have the Vikings as being a little bit too high. I know they're at home. I'm totally fine with not reading too much into that Monday night game against the Eagles. I thought that was just one of those games where like Jalen Hurts played like the best game I've ever seen him play, especially as a thrower. I mean, the Eagles offense was just clicking all night, and that one could have been worse, I think, if not for some sloppy plays in the second half. It was just a classic take your foot off the gas second half by the Philadelphia Eagles. But I also thought Kirk Cousins didn't look quite as bad. Obviously the 3 picks were disastrous, but he was alternating between throwing like extremely impressive throws into extremely tight windows and then throwing like 3 of like the duckiest interceptions you'll ever see. But that's what you get on the road at night with Kirk Cousins. I just think there's a little bit of a lack of respect for the Lions offense. They've scored about 35 and 36 points through 2 weeks. They lead the league in total explosive plays. They have 19 plays that have gone for 10 or more yards through either on the ground or through the air. So I understand their concerns about the Detroit defense. I could see this being a high-scoring game, but I think Detroit keeps this close. I think they feel like they're rolling offensively, and again, the defense is a concern, but I think the number one thing that's impressed me with Detroit is the way that they're just consistently able to generate these explosive plays. Like DeAndre Swift was allegedly hurt last week, and he's still ripping off 50-yard plays.
Mm-hmm. He scored a touchdown on a play where he had the ball and his back was on the ground.
Right.
So, I mean, even when he's literally not on his feet, a threat to score. So, with that in mind, that game does have, I think, tied for the highest total of the week at 53.5. Is that too high for you?
I don't know, man. No, it's not too high. No, I mean, do they get there? I don't know. It's set at that number for a reason, but no, I think it's about right. I mean, I think the Vikings offense is definitely better than what we saw against the Eagles. I mean, all three of those Cousins interceptions, two of them came in the end zone. One of them was picked off at like the 10-yard line. They had the big drop by Irv Smith, a touching tribute to Christian Watson. So that game, honestly, for the Vikings reminded me a lot of the Packers game against them in week one. I don't think that's their, yeah, right. I don't think that's their true identity offensively. I think both these teams can score. I mean, this could very easily be, a 33-31 type of game. I don't think that's out of question whatsoever. The thing we know about the Lions is whether they're up or down, they just keep coming. I mean, they're going to look for chunk plays no matter what. And then, they're like we saw against the Eagles. They looked like they were dead in the water and almost found a way to come back and steal that victory in week one. I also think the total in Houston and Chicago, this is on the complete other end of the spectrum. I think this is too high. It's at 40. I think the total should be somewhere around like 8, 9, something like that. And then that becomes a decision. Like, how are
awful
these
presumptuous that there's going to be scoring in this game?
Yeah, the total could be like 2.5, and I would think about it. Yeah, 2 safeties. I don't know. How are they getting to 40 points? Tell me that.
Oh, I just busted plays. Maybe this is my brain being poisoned by the amount of like football chats I'm in with Bears fans, but they seem to think that Kyler Gordon is like the worst player to ever step on a football field. So if the Texans just target Kyler Gordon, then we might be able to see 40 points. But I think we just have to take heart in the fact that the Bears simply will not let Justin Fields throw the football more than like 20 times. So when you limit your best player and you just seem to be disinterested in seeing whether the guy that you spent a first round draft pick on at the most important position in football can actually do it, there you go. The Bears like to keep that restrictor plate on themselves, and I think that helps when the Texans, of course, will not be scoring much either.
All right, let's talk about a couple lines that are a little too low this week, and I had a hard time as usual. I feel like this one of the two is a little bit harder to find some candidates. But what's the one line to you that sticks out as just being a little too low based on the matchup?
I do think the Rams line is a bit low. I think that it's understandable that it's 3.5, not 4.5, but at the same time, I do feel like the Rams win this one fairly comfortably. I know that they lost a game to the Cardinals last year, but won the other two. Despite what happened in Vegas last weekend with the Cardinals, I still simply cannot believe in them. I still think that, with James Conner being dinged up, them being a little bit one-dimensional going up against this Rams team on offense, and I think the Rams kind of found a bit of their offensive mojo. They just kind of needed a slump buster against the Falcons to get things going, but I think that continues this week, and I think that, any sort of home field advantage that might be baked in here as far as the Cardinals and keeping this line low, I don't think it's going to end up mattering on Sunday, and I think the Rams win this one a little bit more comfortably than what the 3.5 suggests.
Yeah, it feels like this is going to be the kind of completely blanking on the term, but we're going to find out about the Cardinals. How would we put it that way this week? I was pretty convinced that they were terrible after week one. I was still very much convinced of that after 2 quarters in week 2. And then we see Kyler Murray, almost single-handedly win that game against a Raiders team that now I don't know if they're any good. So I think the Rams are a good test. I think we're maybe a little low on the Rams based on them letting Atlanta get back into that game in week 2. But to me, that took some flukes. You got a block punt. They took a safety at the end of that game. That tacked on 2 more points for Atlanta. And the Rams, like the way Sean McVay plays, like it always feels like they're leaving some points on the board. Like they make things a little more difficult than they need to. And obviously it worked out for him last year, so you can't criticize him too much. But and the other thing too, Stafford has 5 picks already through 2 games, so they've thrown away some opportunities. They did that last week. I think they'll be just fine against Arizona. And it's hard not to think back to the last time these teams played in the wild card game last year, which I would say was probably the worst game of Kyler Murray's entire life. I mean, going all the way back, I don't know how he probably had a game in like 3rd or 4th grade where he might have struggled, but
certainly not high school, undefeated in high school.
I don't know if you heard about that. He did not lose a game in high school, had a successful college career as well, John. But that was, that one to me, it's hard to get that out of your mind. So I like the Rams even on the road. But this is one of several games where if the home team was the away team, it would feel like almost a lock. But all the games that you're just about ready to go all in on, you're like, they're on the road. I don't quite know. A couple lines to me that are a little too small. I don't think we're giving enough respect to the Chiefs. And I will acknowledge that they probably should have lost that game to the Chargers. There were some questionable calls. Patrick Mahomes had like 5 throws that very easily could have been picked and were not. You get a little bit of luck with the 100-yard pick six. But 5.5, I understand it. I get it. Colts are kind of a wounded animal at this point. They're backed into a corner. But the Colts have given us no reason to believe that they are a good team at this point. And you're coming off of like barely being able to move the ball against the Texans, not being able to move the ball at all against the Jaguars. And now the Chiefs aren't even getting 6 points. To me, that's, I don't know. It's a little bit low. This line could be Chiefs -7, and I wouldn't blink an eyelash.
No, I wouldn't either. I'm surprised that it settled in where it has. I just got to think that there's deference to like you said, the wounded animal looking for its first win in week 3. That they don't, and they're at home. This is their first home game of the season, so maybe there's something to be said for that. But I mean, the Chiefs, longer layoff, and I feel like that there's just no offensive. Like if the Chiefs get any rhythm on offense, I don't think that the Colts have the horses to keep up with them on offense. Even if Michael Pittman is back, I think that this is still an offense that's limited. It's a team that's built on just kind of winning lower scoring games. And I don't think the Chiefs are going to be particularly amenable to that type of setup. So yeah, I like the Chiefs here by a good bit.
Okay, I'm glad we're on the same page there. And we'll use this as kind of our way of talking about 49ers Broncos, which, as I said earlier, I think this is the game that I'm most looking forward to watching this weekend. 49ers -1.5. They're at Denver, so you got to keep that in mind. But much like Indianapolis, Denver has given us very little reason to believe that they are a good team right now. They're super banged up. San Francisco technically on his backup quarterback, but I think a lot of people would rather have Jimmy Garoppolo in there than Trey Lance. Their Super Bowl odds moved. They got lower after the Trey Lance injury. There's not many teams that could say that you lose your starter and your Super Bowl odds improve. Should the 49ers be favored by more than 1.5?
I'd say yes. Yeah, I think that's it. That's a good circling of this number. The Niners are just so solid. I was talking to Mario Puig on the NFL pod. He thinks that the Niners, top to bottom, kind of have the best defense in the NFL, and D'Amico Ryans does a really good job with coordinating that. There's obviously a ton of talent at every single level of that defense, so it's really complete. And it obviously hasn't netted them as a Super Bowl win yet, but Jimmy Garoppolo can certainly operate that offense at a very high level. If they get George Kittle back, that adding him to the mix along with Deebo Samuel, along with Brandon Ayuk, that's a good offensive core that they have there. So love the Niners side, and I think that they are definitely a contender to win the West, even though that's one of the tougher divisions in the NFC. I do like their chances, whereas, like you said, the Broncos just seem like a mess. A lot of injuries, and I just think that the coaching advantage on the side of San Francisco here is so extreme. And you don't really get it all that often in the NFL, but when you do, I think you need to kind of really focus on it. And I think that Hackett is proving to be the type of coach that might almost be a one and done if it stays at this current trajectory. And Shanahan, one of the best coaches in the NFL. So I think that all those factors in mind, and they're actually not being as far as spread record is concerned, a huge home field advantage for Denver early in the season. Mm-hmm. I do like the Niners a lot in this spot, like you said.
Yeah, it's hard not to, right? I'm really cognizant of trying not to take too many road teams this week, but it's really tough. The Broncos have showed us almost nothing, and they're already down Justin Simmons. Pat Surtain was limited at practice today. We have no idea if he's going to play. Jerry Jeudy did not practice at all today. He could very well miss another week. It's like if Jeudy went out early in that game last week against the Texans, but let's say he doesn't play this week. It's like, if you can't move the ball on the Texans, how do we expect you to move it against the 49ers? So I do think Denver and Hackett like snap out of this haze that they've been in at some point. They're too talented not to, but it's hard for me to think that it's going to come against the 49ers. I mean, much like the Colts, who are really in need of a win, it's just like a really bad time to have to play the Chiefs or a really bad time to have to play the 49ers.
Not right now.
Yes, exactly. All right, so we both won our best bets last week. You had the Texans to cover. Just an insane call by you. I thought that was a really dumb bet.
That's a heat check.
Yeah, it was a heat check, and you knew that Nathaniel Hackett's like Linsanity run of bad coaching would continue. I took the Packers to cover, so I won as well. But we've decided that since I lost week one, it rolls over. If we both win, I need to wait for you essentially to lose one in order for you to take over the read. So let's get to it. I don't know if you want to go. Mow the lawn or do something, head to the store, just come back in 15 minutes and we'll pick back up.
I got a souffle in the oven. Kick
off the new pro football season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using bonus code BETROTO. That's BETROTO, BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Whew. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. You must be 21 years or older to wager. However, John, if you are in Ontario, the age is 19 or older. New customer offer only. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards are issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Not 6, not 8, 7 days from issuance. This excludes, however, Michigan disassociated persons. Please, for the love of God, gamble responsibly. Do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia. For confidential help in Michigan, call 1-800-270-7117, 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. In Puerto Rico, this is a very memorable number, 1-800-981-0023. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. You can call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi. All right, we're on the stretch run here. In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, and Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada and New York. All right. I always think like the Nevada and New York thing. Like imagine listening to that whole read, you're getting fired up to place your bet, and then the last thing is like, oh yeah, if you live in these states, you can't even do it.
I've been waiting for 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. If you live in Nevada and New York, psych. All right. Anyway, let's look ahead to week 3 here. We continue. I want to ask you this. You have to write off one of the following teams. All these teams are winless. One of them has a tie. The others are 0-2. Which of these teams are you out on? They're not going to recover. Tennessee, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, or Las Vegas.
And we got two of them playing each other with Tennessee and Vegas. That's such a huge game for as far as like setting the direction for the rest of their season. But I think if it is the prompt, if they lose, then they're finished. Because I think
sure, yeah. I mean, it could be based on what you've seen so far. It could be if they lose this week, yeah. Whichever of these 4 teams you feel the worst about, essentially.
I think the worst potential loss on the board is Cincinnati. So if they do lose to the Joe Flacco led New York Jets after what happened to them in Dallas, and that's not even getting too far into what happened against Pittsburgh in the opener. Just those 3 losses are all really bad individually, and when you compound them on each other, 3 weeks in a row like that could be like the worst stretch of a lot of teams' seasons. in years type of thing. And that would happen to them to start their AFC title defense.
Mhm.
I would say that I would say Indianapolis is the one that I think is done, but I don't think it has as much to do with them losing to the Chiefs. Whereas if the Jets or if the Bengals do lose this weekend, then I think that the panic button is absolutely out for them.
100%. If you lose to the Jets, yeah, I mean, but it's a non-starter. You lose to the Jets. I don't care if it's at the Jets. I don't care if it's in Cincinnati, and you start 0-3. I mean, that is a panic scenario, and especially after losing to the Jets last year, the way that they got tripped up. This is a better Jets team, I think, and I think if you're Cincinnati, you wish that Zach Wilson was under center and not Joe Flacco. I don't think the Jets make that comeback last week against the Browns if it's Zach Wilson under center. So that's a tough break in some ways, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. You're the defending AFC champs. You shouldn't need something like that. And look, if they find a way to lose this game, it's not going to get any easier for a while because you get the Dolphins in week 4, then the Ravens, then the Saints. You do get a little bit of reprieve and the Falcons in later in October, but I mean, you're in potential, like, the season's in jeopardy mode if you find a way to lose to the Jets. So I'm with you. I think that's the correct answer. With Vegas, like, to me, they're the team that I think has played the best of these 4. And, week 1, you kind of give them a pass. You're like, well, they lost to a good team in the Chargers. Week 2, you don't get a pass for blowing a 20-0 lead, but you also get some credit. You get partial credit for building the 20-0 lead.
Sure. No, absolutely. So I think, if the Raiders lose this week, like, then I'm less confident on their ceiling, but like, I think no matter what, I wouldn't completely write them off based on this weekend. And the Titans are also, this is a great question because, if any of these teams lose, then it's such just a catastrophic start to their season. I went on my Titans rant earlier, but if that continues and they take another loss this weekend, this one at home against a winless but a good winless Raiders team, then you start to wonder just are the Titans on the clock?
Yeah, it could head that way. I mean, you start to worry about just the quarterback situation in general. I mean, they had a nice run. Did they kind of miss their window? That's very possible. Let's run through a few more of these games, and then we'll talk props and Survivor. We'll hand out our locks, and then we'll get out of here. Packers Bucks. We've been teasing it the whole show. So many receivers banged up for both teams. I'm looking at a tweet from Rob Domofsky. Does a great job covering the Packers right now, and he tweeted out the full injury report. And it includes Randall Cobb. It includes Sammy Watkins, Alan Lazard, Christian Watson. All of those guys were either limited or did not participate. I think actually all of them did not participate. And it's even worse for Tampa Bay. I mean, Leonard Fournette was limited. Russell Gage was limited. Chris Godwin did not practice. We don't expect him to play. Julio Jones, who did not play last week, did not practice. Rashad Perriman was limited. I mean, obviously Mike Evans is suspended. I think we're going to see a really, really ugly, really low-scoring game. And to me, it's going to be which team can run the ball better. And that's not often what you say in a matchup between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. But which of these teams can run the ball better? I think that's what it's going to come down to. In our staff picks article, or beating the book, I should say, I think I predicted something like 19-17 Tampa Bay. Like, I feel like that's the kind of game we're getting here. I don't think either quarterback comes away, from this game feeling great.
No, it's going to be ugly. Like we talked about earlier in the show, this is a total that's dropped by a full touchdown, and I think you have a sharp total that you posted as far as your final score goes. So yeah, running the ball is going to be paramount here, and when Leonard Fournette is on the injury report, and all of the key losses that the Tampa Bay has had with its offensive line. You got to be worried about Tampa Bay here. I think that the Packers are one of my few underdog money line thoughts for this week, and maybe I'm putting a little bit too much stock in this Aaron Rodgers team, or maybe I'm putting too much stock in terms of my doubt when it comes to the Buccaneers. But that's a lot for them to be overcoming, even at home. I thought that the way that the Packers ran the ball this past week, again, it was against the Bears, so that you can only take away so much from it. But getting Aaron Jones back on track And I thought like just I felt like with some of the run calls, it felt like I was watching 2019 Ravens on some of it with just like the line movement, the pulling of the guards, the pre-snap motion, the defense is going one way and the play going completely the other. I thought there's some interesting stuff that the Packers run game was dialing up. And then, yes, it's going to be tough with what Rodgers has personnel wise to deal with, but and yeah, I'd love to find some stuff on Romeo Dubs. Hopefully we get some player props posted on him. Dubs season is upon us, but yes, I really do like the Packers in this setup. I think there's just too much working against the Buccaneers right now. And I think it's also important to note that they, defensively, they looked really good against the Cowboys in week 1 while Dak was out there, but offensively, it was a slog. It was a struggle. Had a missed field goal in there, if I remember correctly. So it's not like they were clicking before all of these injuries hit. And now, you're counting on Brashad Perriman or Cole Beasley. I think that's a pretty big problem for Tampa. Too much to overcome.
I think you could say a lot of the same things about Green Bay, though. I mean, even if their receivers end up being slightly healthier, I think Rodgers has exhibited very little trust, and I think the better defense right now is the Bucs. I think the Packers are maybe just as talented, if not more talented, but I think Tampa is the team that's proven to be a better defense so far. And I think this game could end up looking a lot like that Cowboys game in week 1, where obviously they weren't really able to establish the run whatsoever, and it felt like every time Dak dropped back, you'd look, CeeDee Lamb's covered. All right, we don't know what to do, and you could kind of see that narrative unfolding. And it always feels like when the Packers play the Bucs, they get like out physicaled, they get pushed around. That defense kind of seems to have their number. Rodgers has thrown 3 picks in the last 2 games against Tampa. It's always been ugly, and I think Tampa is better prepared to win an ugly game at this point in the season. Let's go Eagles Commanders real quickly. I think yet another game. If this was in Philly, you'd feel great about it. If the Eagles weren't on a short week, you'd feel great about it. But to me, there are just enough variables to make me think twice about the Eagles, who, as of right now, are 6.5-point favorites at Washington.
So, yeah, there is a lot that makes you feel a little bit queasy about backing the Eagles this week. But at the end of the day, you just kind of have to take stock of where you're at with both of these teams and where they're at. Carson Wentz, I think, is going to be perhaps a little bit too gassed up to be playing his former team in the Eagles. And I think the mistakes that haven't been there drastically, the way that we know that they can be for Wentz, I think that they show up this week against the Eagles. And I think that the Eagles come out and they kind of stamp their name on being like maybe the team to beat in the NFC. So even though like there are those like kind of old timey, time tested things like being on the road against a divisional opponent, playing on that short week, I think even despite those, that the Eagles are really, really clicking on both sides of the ball. And I think that they end up taking care of business here.
All right. How about Bills Dolphins? We talked about this one a little bit earlier as a line that is maybe a little bit too high. And I do kind of agree with that. I mean, the Bills, like the Eagles, coming in on a short week, you're traveling all the way down to Miami. You got to deal with potential rain. You got to deal with the humidity, the heat down there. I think that's less of a big deal early in the season when it's warm essentially everywhere. But, the Bills also got banged up a little bit on Monday night. I mean, they ended up banging up the Titans a little bit more, but still dealing with some key injuries of their own. We still don't know if Gabe Davis is going to play. Dawson Knox has been limited, and some defensive players also banged up for Buffalo. But, I think we feel totally differently about this game if the Dolphins never make that comeback. But, of course, they did. And, that's part of what happened in week 2. With that said, are the Bills just looking too dominant right now that you can't picture them getting tripped up here?
I'm going to say no. Maybe again, I am drinking the Riptide Rush colored Kool-Aid on the Dolphins, or is that the Gatorade color that's closest to the Dolphins? I forget. But either way,
research on that. Keep talking.
That one might be purple. But so sorry to our Gatorade Frost enthusiasts. Purple. Okay, yeah. So way off. Anywho, this might be my upset call of the week. I think the Dolphins can win. I really do. I think the Bills, it's not moving off of them as saying that they are the Super Bowl favorite. But again, This is their first game on a Sunday this year. They blew out the Dolphins in September in Miami. Last year, I think it's a totally different story. I think Mike McDonald has the Dolphins playing with a certain level of swagger that you would hope to see from a team from Miami. The offense is clicking. I think that whereas the Rams and the Titans kind of got shook the second that the Bills kind of hit their big play, I think the Dolphins are equipped to punch right back. And I think that's a huge thing. I don't think the Bills have really faced any adversity in any of their games yet this season. I think that this is a big test for them. Not that they aren't battle tested from these last couple of years with their deep playoff runs, but yeah, I think the Dolphins have a legit shot of winning this game, and I really do like them to cover at the very least.
You could talk me into the cover. I'm not going to disagree with you on anything that you said. I think that's all correct. I will say, if they fall behind by 2 touchdowns again, I don't like their chances to come back against this Bills team. I like that type of game can't happen again. I think they need to go punch for punch with the Bills from the start and right. Probably even build a lead early on. You can't be throwing multiple picks in the first half and expect to repeat really any sort of comeback on this Buffalo defense. But if they could do that early on, then yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Raiders Titans. I just feel like I'm walking to a slow death here. I really want to take the Raiders. They're on the road yet again. Another game where if this was in Vegas, I would feel really good about it. I just think this is it's such an obvious, oh, you thought we were dead type of game for Mike Vrabel and the Titans. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of key injuries on that side. And, much like the Colts, like they've just looked bad. They've looked bad. Like if you're picking the Titans, it's just, you're asking them to show something that they haven't so far.
Right. They've always been a bit one-dimensional, but then at the same time, like they still at the very least had Corey Davis and AJ Brown as your threats when you overload the box. But when the run game isn't working and if they get into a spot where they have to play catch up again, and the thing that works best for their offense is Derrick Henry, that you got the clock working against you all of a sudden. I don't think that this defense holds up against the sheer depth of the weapons that the Raiders have. Like you said, it feels like a very public pick, but you know what? Everything that I've said about the Titans and talked through about the Titans, like I am ready to throw dirt on the Titans. So I'm going to continue to do so here. The Raiders, hand me the shovel. Let's go.
All right. I love it. And we have an update on the Gatorade situation, by the way. Gatorade Gate. Arctic Blitz appears to be the Dolphins colored Gatorade, Arctic Blitz. We also have Glacier Freeze that it's a little more blue tinted, but it could go either way there.
Arctic Blitz probably a little bit past my peak Gatorade time. So I think that the second one that you mentioned, it was the one that was coming to mind.
Yeah. Arctic Blitz, one of those Gen X flavors, or what's after millennials?
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
The Zoomers.
Okay, as soon as I said that, I didn't think that was right. Yeah, it's Gen Z Gatorade. Let's go to some props, some Survivor talk, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Reminder, use our promo code BETROTO on the BetMGM app or BetMGM.com if you're throwing in any prop bets this weekend. Let's just rifle through some of your favorite props. Let's go rapid fire here.
All right, so my favorite props for this week, I love a couple anytime touchdowns, Travis Kelce and Drake London in particular. Drake London, I think is going to come in close to 2-1 for his anytime touchdown. Love the way that he looked in week 2. I think that continues against this Seahawks team. Justin Fields under 25.5 pass attempts, like that one. I know it feels a little bit chalky, almost too good to be true, but until we see otherwise, we just got to figure that the Bears aren't going to let him throw all that much. I like Lamar Jackson to go over 217.5 passing yards. Again, the Ravens just simply cannot run the ball. He's going to have to throw it, and therefore over 217.5. And then I like Breece Hall over 44.5 total yards. He eclipsed that number last week, although it's important to note his snap count really dropped off last week, but he performed well. So I think the snap count comes back up this week, and he tops that 44.5 number.
All right. I like it a lot. I like the Breece Hall one, especially. I got Joe Burrow over 23.5 completions against the Jets. That's at plus money. I think I like Cincinnati to win. I like Cincinnati to cover. But you can also see them, once again, starting off a little bit slowly and really needing to lean on the passing game to win that game. And Burrow's had 24 and 33 completions through his first 2 games. A ton of attempts. Completion percentage has been fine. They just haven't been ripping off the yardage. I have a Justin Fields one as well, under 176.5 passing yards. You're getting that at minus 115. It's 115 either way. I mean, I would take this at like 150. I just don't see either of these teams, the Bears or the Texans, really doing a whole lot offensively. Joe Flacco over 77.5 pass attempts. I love that one this week. And Aaron Jones under 52.5 rushing yards against Tampa Bay. That one's at minus 118 over at BetMGM. I think Aaron Jones can have a decent game, but I think it's going to be a mixture of running and receiving. And I don't see this Tampa Bay defense giving up a ton on the ground to Green Bay. I think maybe Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon can combine for around 100 yards, but I don't see Aaron Jones, having a great game on the ground. I think it's going to have to be done through the air. Any qualms with any of those props?
So would you try to target, see the line for a total yardage prop for Aaron Jones if you think that, maybe the run game isn't going to be there for him, but, with all the pass catching injuries that the Packers have, maybe he's a little bit active enough in that facet of the game that maybe you like his total yardage prop instead?
Yeah, I'm trying to dig that up as we speak. Aaron Jones, 85.5 total yards.
That still feels high.
I know,
feel
it's
like
a little too high.
This is like a 50 receiving or a 50 rushing, 30 receiving type of game for him.
Yep.
But we'll have to vault that if that ends up being exactly correct. So Flacco over 77.5 passing yards or pass attempts.
Yeah, I thought I stuck that one past you.
Is that an alt total?
Yeah.
Where can I get? I can get that at BetMGM. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I teased Flacco up to 77.5 pass attempts. It's at like plus 20,000.
Next week, we're both going to be wearing monocles and broadcasting from the beach.
Yeah, you just wait until Flacco's at like 59 of 88 in that game.
Who's laughing then? Everyone.
Let's talk some Survivor. I feel like in some ways this is not quite as difficult of a week for Survivor, and we'll have to clip this like when my pick inevitably loses.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for spread picks, it's a nightmare. For pick'em leagues, things like that, it's a nightmare. But I like KC. They have over a third of the picks right now in Yahoo Survivor leagues, almost 35%. I think they get it done. I mean, it's easy to imagine Indianapolis hanging around, backs against the wall at home, but I don't see Indianapolis winning that game outright. You could talk me into the cover, but I don't see that happening. And the team that I'm going to be on in Survivor, in the RotoWire Survivor League, I'm going Cincinnati. This is like the 4th time I brought it up. They can't lose this game. They just can't.
They certainly better not. So yes,
my logic is they can't.
And even if Joe Flacco is throwing it 100+ times on Sunday, you still got to like the Bengals bouncing back. So I am lightly considering the Bengals in Survivor as well. I'm going with the Eagles. Kind of based on what I was talking about earlier. I just think that they're the better team. I know there's some risky elements, division, road game, short week, blah, blah, blah. But the Eagles really are one of the best teams in the NFL. And I don't think that that's just reactionary to Monday night. I think that, they are really solid top to bottom. I will go with the Eagles in Survivor this week.
All right. I love it. I do think the Eagles, at some point, they're going to get tripped up. But you can't, there's really no argument after how well they played, especially that defense. I mean, they're going up against the Washington passing game that I think is a lot better than we expected, has a little more, more firepower in that receiving core. And even Logan Thomas has looked good for Washington so far. But the Eagles, I mean, the way that they blanketed Justin Jefferson and were really all over that Minnesota passing game on Monday night was impressive. Who are you fading this week in Survivor?
So my fade in Survivor this week, come back to me on that one. I still have been kind of working in the mines, trying to figure that one out. But I wouldn't say it's. Oh wait, no, I know what it is. It's the Bills. The Bills are the team that I'm fading in Survivor this week. They don't have like a super high percentage, but I think the gas is a little bit too hot on the Bills right now, and I'm going to save them for another week.
Yeah, I'm not taking the Bills either. I mean, they're only at about 1% as of right now. So that one seems like somewhat of a stay away in something this high of stakes. But I'm going to fade the Chargers. They have the second highest pick percentage as of right now. They're hanging around 30% of Yahoo Survivor pools. People are locking in the Chargers. And like I said above, it's too risky, man. I think there's too much risk of a Justin Herbert in-game injury. I mean, there's too much risk of even if he doesn't like truly suffer an injury or re-injure the ribs, like just being affected. It obviously it's right in the middle of your body. You can't really do anything without aggravating that. And there's also a chance that the Jags are just much better than we thought, and the Chargers could be prone to off weeks. We've seen it with them before. I think people are just closing their eyes and taking the Chargers as if they're playing like a bottom feeder team. And maybe the Jaguars do prove to be that. They didn't look great for a lot of that game in week 1 against Washington. It's totally possible that they just caught the Colts at a good time in week 2. But yeah, I would not feel super, super confident locking in the Chargers. And again, if you want to save the Chiefs and maybe save some of the other elite teams, but you got to keep in mind that, I mean, the Chiefs have a tough schedule, man. Like they play, 6 more division games, 5 more division games the rest of the way. You're not going to want to use them likely in those weeks. So I don't have a problem burning a team like KC this week in what feels like a really advantageous matchup. The time has come, John. Best bets. What is your favorite bet against the spread this weekend? What are you locking in?
I'm locking in the Niners on the road as favorites. I'll do it. I'll eat the chalk there. And I know it's risky, but I love betting against Denver right now, and I'm going to continue to do so. 1.5, basically, they just have to win the game. I think they do it, and I think they do it by a field goal plus. So I will take the Niners. I was a game that we kind of smartly for content purposes steered clear from. Saints Panthers. I kind of was thinking about the Panthers though as my other best bet. Why are they home underdogs? Like they're both terrible teams. Jameis Winston turns the ball over a ton. Alvin Kamara's dinged up. The Panthers aren't good, but I think that they can at least play at a level that holds serve at home. So I'm confused as to why they're the home dog. So secondary lock, the lock of the lock. Yeah, so that's like the doorknob lock. The deadbolt lock is the Niners, but when you're closing up shop for the night, the doorknob lock would be the Panthers.
Yeah, everyone knows all you got to do if it's not a deadbolt, just take a credit card, slide it in there, you're good. I mean, it's not something that you can really depend on. So I like that. Not that I've ever done that before. I've locked myself out of the house a number of times. I did not intentionally omit Saints Panthers by any means, but it's a weird game, and we have a ton of injury question marks for the Saints. That's one that in my pick'em league I'm really struggling with. Like I don't think I'm going to bring myself to actually pick the Panthers to win outright, but I'm keeping it low. It's on the watch list. Like the Panthers, much like a lot of teams right now, it feels like are one more loss away from truly spiraling, and they've been close the last 2 weeks. And like you said, the Saints offense has been pretty awful through the first 2 weeks of the season, other than that fourth quarter against Atlanta. My considerations for locks, to peel back the curtain, were Rams over the Cardinals, Chiefs over the Colts, but I'm going with the Bengals over the Jets. The line was at 4.5, then it was at 5, then it was at 5.5. Now it's all the way up to 6. I would have loved to have locked it in at 4.5, but even at 6, I think the Bengals can win this game by a touchdown. I think this is the week that all of our concerns about this Bengals offense, we can start to relax a little bit. I think they come out with a better script to begin the game. That's really what's killed them early on, is these slow starts and kind of feeling like they're playing from behind. I think we get Joe Mixon going. The volume has been there. The yards per carry certainly have not. But I think that all turns around this week. I think our opinion on the Bengals, their season is saved. They get it done in convincing fashion against the New York Jets.
There it is, a cathartic win incoming for the Bengals, and I'm sure Jeff will send you his Bengals Stormtrooper outfit afterward.
All right, that's going to do it for the NFL portion of the pod. Appreciate everybody listening. We're off to a fantastic start with this podcast, and thank you, of course, to our presenting sponsor, BetMGM, for rolling with us this season. Again, if you're betting this weekend, make sure you're doing it on the BetMGM app. Go to betmgm.com as well, and you have to use our promo code. You have to. BetRoto, BETROTO. Sign up with that bonus code, BetRoto, and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. That is what the kids, I believe, call a rack or a band. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of free money out there.
Take advantage of it, friends.
Let's talk some college football, Jonathan. We got a big week ahead of us after a couple kind of felt like down weeks. We had some great games in the first week 0 and week 1 of the season. And then, kind of a lot of those cupcakey type of games, warm-up games in weeks 2 and 3, but some intriguing ones on the schedule this week. Wisconsin is at Ohio State. I have my clown makeup ready. I'm prepared for yet another beatdown on Saturday night. I'm golfing with the boys on Saturday. We're going to try to talk strategy, like, what can we do to help the team? I got one of my best friends is going to the game. His girlfriend is from Ohio. He's going to the game. He's bringing his parents, who are meeting her parents for the first time, and they're meeting at the game, which I'm like,
this has the makings of like a like meltdown like a Reddit post, like my friend did this, and scene.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like am I the asshole type of post for my parents beating up my girlfriend's parents at a game. And like, they're diehard Wisconsin fans. Her parents are diehard Ohio State fans. So maybe
the brandy was out. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'll have a report on that on next week's podcast. But what are your favorite games to watch this week? What are your favorite gambling leans? Let's let it rip.
Letting it rip here. So one of the few ranked matchups of the week, we got Clemson against Wake Forest. I'm on the record saying that I do not like this Clemson team. The sooner that they they pull the Band-Aid off and go to Cade Klubnik over DJU, the better. But I don't know if it happens here. And I think Wake Forest is one of the more fun teams in college football to root for. They're just kind of like a funky little small school. The Demon Deacons. Sam Hartman, awesome player, really fun to watch. A.T. Perry, just a massive guy, almost like an ACC version of Drake London. So there's a lot to be interested in here, but I think, unfortunately, defense uglies it up to the point where Clemson ends up covering that 7.5. I hate that there's the hook there, but I still feel strongly that Clemson wins this one. If Wake Forest just can't get it in gear on offense, I think that Clemson, their power rushing attack led by Will Shipley, going to end up being too much. They just kind of end up grinding them out and then, kind of pulling away late. So that's my lean for that one. Florida versus Tennessee. Despite what we've seen from Anthony Richardson the last couple of weeks, and it's been, really bad. The Kentucky game was terrible. And then South Florida last week, the Gators almost blow that one. Now we see them as 11.5 point dogs on the road against Tennessee. I like the Gators. I think they're going to be able to get this not done, but I think that's just too big of a number. I think if they are able to get Tennessee into those hurry up 3 and outs, that defense for Tennessee is going to get tired. A tired defense trying to tackle Anthony Richardson over and over again, or Trevor Etienne, brother of Travis Etienne, that could end up being a bit of a slog for Tennessee. So I think if the Gators play their game, get Tennessee off script a little bit, then I think they end up keeping this one within the number. I do like Ohio State to cover 18.5 against the Badgers. I hate to say it, but that's just kind of.
I think you're breaking up. You're breaking up.
You can't say that. I like never trust my Ethernet cable, so like I'm gonna actually believe you. And then USC versus Oregon State. That's setting up as a really fun Pac-12 matchup. I was able to kind of like get eyes on USC for the entirety of its game against Fresno State last week and came away understanding the hype. Like, but before, they wiped the floor with Rice and all this and that. And you're like, okay, you can do that. But to do it against Fresno State, even though Jake Haener got hurt, I was super impressed by USC. Going up to Oregon State, it's been a struggle for them before. We've seen them, good USC teams, go by the wayside up in Corvallis before. And this is the best Oregon State team in a long time. I mean, dare I say, like since the Jaquez Rogers era, which I believe was an era that did beat USC, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, so 6.5 points. I think that USC just is that good. I think that if I had to rank the teams that are, outside your top 3 with Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State, I probably put Michigan 4, and I think USC would be my number 5 team. Honestly, I really think that USC is kind of something else. Unfortunately, I hate the way that they've done it, but you can't deny it. So I think that they go up and win by a touchdown in Corvallis.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight you on any of that. I was able to catch most of that Fresno State USC game last weekend. And look, man, as someone who's still very nostalgic for the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Dwayne Jarrett era, It's kind of cool to see USC back, at least on offense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they are electric. They got so, and I love how, it's always pretty with USC, but you have Travis Dye with the mustache, very similar to mine. He also doesn't wear gloves as a running back. That's such
jarring.
a tough look. I love that.
Yeah, jarring to see it.
Jordan Addison, wait a second, what happened?
Is awesome. Yeah, Mario Williams is awesome. I mean, they're not fully back. They have not earned that status yet. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. They need to do a lot more before we allow them into the back discussion. But they at least look like they're back. They look like old USC in a lot of ways.
Yes, they absolutely do. So like that's fun. And I think that they kind of like, start to get. It's crazy to say against Oregon State, but I think that's going to be a nice little proving win for them. And then one other stray one. I'm a Maryland guy from there. Like basically my whole family went to Maryland. I like the Terps, the Fighting Terps for their football program. I'm like always pulling for it, the little engine that could. Jim Harbaugh has, for whatever reason, really had an axe to grind with the Terps. Like I think it's always been at least a 4-touchdown differential between Michigan and the Terrapins. Michigan only like a 17.5-point favorite in this one. Love Michigan to cover that one. I think that this is a 3-touchdown minimum game. I think we see that there's at least one every year. Italia meltdown. It's happening this week in the Big House. So, or it might be in
It's at the Big House.
Okay, then yeah, no, absolutely. Michigan goes ahead and kind of cleans house at the Big House.
Okay, nice little, I assume unintentional pun there, but nice work to finish things out. Unfortunately, I think you're right about Wisconsin. Ohio State's wearing the black uniforms. I mean, yeah, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin. I think, we're still a day away from that game being played, but I don't feel good. I think, after the loss to Washington State, I think people maybe jump back on because Wisconsin looked amazing last week against, honestly, what I would say was the worst FBS team I've ever seen in New Mexico State. Like the defense being played in the second half of that game was astonishingly bad.
Yeah, no, I got a little bit of like delirium watching New Mexico State in week 0 because that game was on same time as Hawaii Vandy. Mm-hmm. So I'd be watching college football for like 13 hours straight. And like I worked that entire day. Like my brain was oatmeal. And the way that New Mexico State looked when they brought in that Gavin Frakes kid against Nevada, I'm like, maybe there's something here. I'm getting a little vibes that, Frakes could be someone that we see playing at a Power 5 school next year, but it's like, oh no, like the rest of this team is just atrocious. What you saw from them against Minnesota and then against Wisconsin, that's who they really are. It's a Jerry Kill outfit if I've ever seen one. It's bad.
All right, my man. Had fun chatting with you as always. Best of luck in all your bets this weekend. Best of luck to the Dogs. Best of luck to Maryland, I guess. I know you're a dual citizen.
Yep.
Throw some luck out there for the Badgers. We need it, of course. But looking forward to recapping this with you next week. And, a week from now, we'll be on to week 4 already.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it as well. And yes, let's keep it respectable here, Badgers.